What happens when the quietest person in the room turns out to be the one holding all the power? She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase boardroom glory or corporate clout. But behind closed lab doors, Dr. Elise Harrington was building something the world had never seen: an unbreakable quantum encryption system that could transform global security. And then they fired her. No explanation, no recognition, just a folder, a handshake, and security waiting at her door. But what her company didn't know was that Elise had been planning for this moment, because while they were busy preparing press releases, she was quietly filing a patent in her own name for the very technology they thought they owned. So here's the question. What do you do when everything you've created is stolen from you? Do you fight back? Do you walk away? Or do you play the long game and let your silence speak louder than their ambition ever could? This is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about ownership, quiet power, and the cost of underestimating the wrong person. If you're ready for a story that challenges how we see innovation, power, and justice, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe so you never miss the stories that matter. Now, let me tell you how she rewrote the rules. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I hadn't noticed until the condensation dripped onto my thumb. Even then, I didn't flinch. My eyes were fixed on the screen, the soft pulse of code rendering into the final validation results. It was quiet. No music, no white noise, just the hum of the servers in the next room, and the staccato of my own breath. Halcyon was stable, perfectly stable. 3 years. 3 years of false starts, theory rewrites, simulations that collapsed under their own weight, and skeptics in press shirts who called it too idealistic. But this morning, this quiet, ordinary morning in the glass tower of Navaris Systems, everything had changed, and only I knew it. My name is Dr. Elise Harrington. For the past 5 years, I led the Theoretical Systems Lab at Navaris, a team tucked into the far end of the 7th floor, near the server room and always just out of sight. We worked on things most executives didn't understand: quantum state synchronization, multi-layer encryption stacks, and what we called post-truth security. No one cared much until they realized it could make them rich. Halcyon wasn't just another encryption protocol. It was different. It learned. It evolved. It didn't just respond to threats, it predicted them, weaving itself tighter each time an intruder came close. We weren't patching a wall. We were building a self-aware labyrinth. It was, in every technical sense, impossible. Until it wasn't. I had just begun drafting my update to the research board when the knock came. Precise. 3 taps. I glanced at the clock. 9:17 a.m. Exactly. The door opened before I could speak. Victor Langston walked in, as if he owned the floor. Technically, he did Chief Strategy Officer of Navaris, groomed for the CEO seat, and always immaculately dressed like he stepped off the cover of some minimalist tech magazine. His smile was tight. It was curated. He held a folder in one hand, which was unusual. Victor never carried paper. "Elise," he said, voice warm like velvet, but eyes scanning the room. "Just the person I was hoping to see. I was just finalizing the validation data," I replied, gesturing to the screen. "We're ready." "It's perfect," he cut in, settling into the chair across from me. "The board's been buzzing about the preliminary numbers. Government interest. 2 of the top defense contractors are already circling." Something twisted in my stomach. He hadn't even looked at the screen. "You didn't come to talk about the data," I said. Victor tilted his head, the mask of friendliness still plastered on. "There's been a strategic realignment. The board believes Halcyon's in its commercial phase now. We're bringing in a transition team to scale operations. You've done brilliant work, Elise, truly, but we need someone more, outward-facing. I felt it before I heard it. I'm being replaced. He didn't flinch. Your current role is being dissolved. We'll be restructuring the lab under corporate applications. You'll receive full severance 6 months, actually, in appreciation for your contributions. And the standard NDA, of course. He slid the folder across the desk. It was surgical, clinical, like I was some component he was retiring. My fingers touched the folder, but I didn't open it. My heart wasn't racing. There was no outburst inside me, no fire, just a strange, hollow stillness. This is still my project. Victor, I said quietly. It was your project, he corrected. Standing now? Security will escort you to collect your things. Please leave any company property on your desk. There it was. The moment. The break. I stood slowly, every movement deliberate. I didn't reach for the folder again. Instead, I looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "Of course, I understand." He blinked, confused, maybe, unsure. He'd expected outrage, pleading, some grand show of ego, but I gave him nothing, just silence. As he turned to leave, I added, "Victor." He paused in the doorway. "You should know, Halcyon's architecture isn't quite what you think." His smile flickered. "I'm sure our new team will figure it out." I nodded. "I'm sure they'll try." Security was polite, too polite. One of them, Jared, I think looked genuinely uncomfortable as he followed me through the corridors, past frosted glass walls and curious glances. From behind one panel, I caught the eye of Rowan Patel, my deputy lead. He mouthed something, but I couldn't make it out. His expression, though, was unmistakable. What the hell is happening? I didn't stop to explain. I couldn't, not yet. At the lobby, they handed me a cardboard box with my name scribbled on it, a photo of my dog, a pen from grad school, one of those quantum entanglement models I'd built by hand years ago. 5 years of work, condensed into a shoebox. When I stepped into the sunlight, everything felt louder. The honk of a car, the buzz of a phone in someone's pocket. The city kept moving, as if nothing had shifted. But something had. I sat in my car for a moment. No tears, just stillness. Then I pulled out my personal phone, the one Victor didn't know about, and scrolled to a folder marked Halcyon Route Backup. And then I checked the timestamp on the USPTO confirmation email. 6 months ago. Filed, verified, approved. The patent was mine. There's a silence that follows betrayal. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or rage. It settles in slowly, like fog rolling into a valley thick, suffocating, and oddly serene. As I drove home, the morning sun blazing off high-rise windows, I let the silence wrap around me like a second skin. I should have seen it coming. In hindsight, the signs were everywhere. The way Victor had started showing up to team syncs unannounced. How legal counsel began reviewing our internal notes for alignment. Even the shift in language during quarterly reviews, from research milestones to market viability. The moment they saw dollar signs, I became a liability. The irony, I'd already seen them coming. My apartment smelled faintly of lavender and ozone when I stepped inside. I placed the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and stood still for a long moment, staring at it. Then I walked past it into the study, to the old dark wood desk my father had left me. Inside the bottom drawer was a black binder, and beneath that, a fireproof pouch. When I opened it, The light from the window caught the golden stamp of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. 6 months ago, I had quietly filed patent 167Q HALC self-adaptive quantum encryption framework with biometric master key tethering, the core of Halcyon. Not just the interface Victor's team was drooling over, but the actual skeleton, the logic branches, the quantum calibration cascade, the entropy harmonics. They could copy the shell, but without the spine, it was just a mannequin. My phone buzzed. A text from Rowan. What just happened? Are you okay? Tell me you saw this coming. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I typed, I'm okay. Tell the team to back up everything they legally can. Keep your head down. Another ping. Victor's already brought in his own people. Some contractors I've never seen before. Of course he had. They would strip Halcyon for parts, try to stitch together what they thought they understood, but they wouldn't get far, because what Victor didn't realize was that Halcyon had a heart, and I had designed it to beat only in rhythm with a single, encrypted master key. That key existed only in one place, me. That evening, I opened a bottle of Merlot and sat cross-legged in the middle of my living room floor. Papers spread around me like a quiet war. Each document, each time-stamped diagram was a breadcrumb leading back to the truth that Halcyon was mine, in every measurable way. Yet, amid the methodical planning, a part of me faltered, not in logic, in feeling. I'd spent years with those people. Late nights, weekend scrambles, takeout-fueled code marathons. Rowan, who once rewrote our entire QA pipeline in 3 days. Lena, who cried the first time our simulation held past 60 seconds. Paul, who brought his daughter to the lab on snow days and taught her how to solder. They were still inside Navaris, still believing, perhaps, that we were building something greater than ourselves. Was I abandoning them? Was silence a kind of betrayal too? A knot formed in my chest. I wasn't built for revenge. I was a builder, a systems thinker, a problem solver, and yet here I was at the beginning of a war I hadn't asked for, but could no longer walk away from. The next morning brought more movement. 3 unread emails from journalists at TechSite, Quantum Daily, and Cipher Watch, each asking for comment on my departure and the rumors swirling about intellectual property disputes at Navaris. I deleted them. Not yet. Timing mattered. But one name did make me pause. Dr. Naomi Voss. The email subject line was simple. Lunch. Naomi was the founder and CEO of Aeon Quantum. The lean but lethal competitor Navaris had always quietly feared. She had a PhD in theoretical physics, a military background, and the kind of sharp presence that cut through every boardroom like a scalpel. We'd only met once years ago at a conference in Zurich. She had complimented my early Halcyon prototype and given me her card. I never used it, until now. I replied with a single line, name the place. We met at Nicolette's, an understated French bistro tucked between 2 glass towers downtown. Naomi was already seated when I arrived, in a black blazer and no makeup, her short silver curls tucked neatly behind her ears. Elise, she said, rising to shake my hand. You look calm for someone whose name is flooding my news feeds. I'm not sure that's a compliment. I smiled, sliding into the seat across from her. We ordered wine, no menus needed. She leaned forward, lacing her fingers. So, you're out. They pushed me, I said evenly. Then try to take what I built. She tilted her head. They still think they own it. They own the name. Maybe a few UI schematics. But Halcyon's real framework is mine. Patented, secured, verified. Naomi's eyes lit up. Not with greed, but recognition. They have the canvas. You have the brush. I nodded. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just dense with unspoken opportunity. Finally, she said, I assume you didn't agree to lunch just to vent? I didn't. I met her gaze. I want to build Halcyon right. Not as a demo tool for shareholders, but as the foundation for something honest, unbreakable. And you need backing. I hesitated. Pride whispered that I could do this alone, but the stakes were too high now. I need infrastructure and people I can trust. Naomi sat back, considering. I tried to hire you 3 years ago. You turned me down. I was loyal, I said softly, to the wrong vision. Naomi pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, and then smiled. Check your email tonight. You'll find an offer with full lab access, top-tier staffing, and equity. But more than that, you'll have autonomy. No suits breathing down your neck. I exhaled. For the first time in 2 days, my body relaxed into the chair. Naomi raised her glass. To reclaiming what's yours, we clinked. I didn't know it yet, but that clink was the sound of battle lines being drawn. Some battles begin with declarations. Mine began with silence. After lunch with Naomi, I went home and shut off my phone for the rest of the day. Not out of fear I'd already made my move, but because I needed stillness. In a world that prized noise, spectacle, and fast reactions, I needed to remind myself that true power often unfolded in the quiet. I opened my laptop, not the Novaris-issued one, of course. This was my personal system, air-gapped, offline, untouched by company servers. From it, I accessed Halcyon's deep root architecture, the core sequences I'd written by hand during sleepless nights. No one at Novaris had seen these, not even Rowan. Every branch of logic, every adaptive layer, every biometric tether. I had built this in my apartment, in the early hours, driven not by deadlines, but by obsession, and I had proof of it all. I opened the encrypted archive labeled Origin. Inside were 3 years' worth of time-stamped logs, Git commits, signed PDF research notes, screen recordings of tests, even voice memos to myself during debugging marathons. I had footage of the very first successful stabilization, the moment Halcyon held quantum state beyond 90 seconds. It was shaky, filmed on an old webcam, my face half lit and exhausted, whispering, "You did it. Elise, you did it." Watching that video now, I felt something in my throat tighten. I hadn't watched it in over a year. At 9:12 p.m., I called Harriet Sloan, my patent attorney, and one of the few people I trusted without question. She answered on the second ring. "That was fast." "You've seen the news?" I asked. "I've seen enough. Novaris is about to step on a landmine. I need to make sure the explosion lands on the right person." Harriet's voice sharpened. "Tell me what you need. I want to authorize full defense posture on the Halcyon patent. Preemptive filings, lockouts, notification to the USPTO about pending infringement. If they try to access protected modules or spin off derivatives, we'll be ready," she said before I could finish. "They can bluff all they want, but they're 5 steps behind." There was a pause. "Elise," she added, more softly, "this is going to get ugly." I closed my eyes. "I know. You okay?" "I'm not angry," I said, surprised by my own answer. "I'm tired, but focused." Harriet smiled through the phone. "Then they have no idea what's coming." The next day, I woke to a quiet storm. Half the tech blogs were running speculative pieces about my exit. Some framed it as a simple restructure. Others hinted at something deeper, a power grab, a founder's conflict, a patent dispute. None of them had the full picture yet. That was intentional. But someone else had caught on. A text from Rowan Victor just called a closed meeting. Everyone's tense. They tried to run the demo this morning. It crashed after 38 seconds. They're blaming server instability. I checked the logs. They're trying to reverse engineer the encryption logic, but it's not holding. Then a second message. Tell me there's a reason you're letting them flail like this. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then, slowly, I typed, "They took Halcyon from me. Now they have to understand what they actually took." But beneath the certainty, there was something else stirring. Guilt. These people, Rowan, Lena, the dev team, they had believed in me, trusted me. Most of them still worked there because they thought Halcyon was being used for good, for protection, for privacy, for progress, not for stock manipulation or shareholder theater. Was I punishing them too? I sat in my home office, eyes scanning the whiteboard still covered in equations from a month ago, and felt the weight of it pressing down. For all my planning, all my legal readiness, this wasn't just about ownership. It was about what kind of world I wanted this technology to exist in, and that meant making a choice soon, not just to protect myself, but to offer an alternative, a vision better than Victor's. That afternoon, I met Naomi again. This time, in a downtown lab she hadn't shown to the public yet. Clean lines, quiet rooms, no branding on the doors. "This could be your space," she said, leading me through a room filled with high-grade quantum processors and biometric workstations. No shareholders, no board meetings, just work. Real work. I ran my fingers along the edge of a console, and the team, yours to build, Rowan, Lena, anyone you trust. You'll have full authority to architect Halcyon the way you envisioned it. The name will change, of course, but the heart stays the same. I turned to her. "Why are you doing this?" Naomi shrugged. "Because I've seen what happens when good people stay quiet, and because you remind me of who I used to be before I had to play CEO." I smiled, and for the first time in days, meant it. That night, I drafted a single email, not to the press, not to the board of Novaris, but to my old team. Subject, "What comes next, body?" I know many of you have questions. Some of you are scared, others are angry. I don't blame you. I was silenced without warning. But Halcyon was never about one company. It was about a future where privacy could be real, not bought and sold. I'm building again, a space where innovation isn't treated like currency, but like contribution. If you still believe in what we started, then know this: you're not alone. Elise. I hit send, then I sat back, the weight in my chest finally loosening. The pieces were in motion, and in the distance, I could already hear the cracking sound of Novaris's polished mask beginning to fracture. They say destruction is loud, but that morning, it started with silence. At exactly 8:04 a.m., I received a message from Rowan. System locked. Quantum sync fails at 36 seconds. Error logs piling up. Victor just walked into the server room. He looks bad. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the sky shift through my kitchen window. It was a pale blue day, cloudless, deceptively calm, the kind of day where you'd never guess the foundation beneath someone's empire was crumbling. At 8:15 a.m., another text. He tried to override the encryption manually. The system flagged a security breach and reset all active threads. He threw his tablet across the room. I smiled, not with cruelty, but with clarity. I'd warned him. After all, Halcyon wasn't designed to be forced open. It wasn't a vault. It was a living thing, and Victor had never learned to speak its language. Inside Novaris, the fractures were spreading. Rowan would later tell me how the executive floor descended into chaos, engineers blaming infrastructure, managers blaming coders, Victor blaming everyone. They didn't understand that Halcyon wasn't failing. It was resisting. Without the master key, without me, every attempt to access its deeper layers triggered a fail-safe loop. The system would re-randomize its quantum state, breaking the chain and rendering the entire platform functionally useless. Victor had thought Halcyon was a product, but Halcyon was principle embedded in logic. It knew how to protect itself from people like him. By midday, 3 engineers had walked out. One of them, Lena, sent me a single-line email from her personal account. "Thank you for building it right." I stared at that message for a long time. There was something profoundly human in it. Gratitude not for a feature, but for a choice. The choice to build defensively, to foresee exploitation, to encode resistance, not just efficiency, but even then, something tugged at me. Was I letting it all burn? Was my silence still a form of complicity? It would have been easy to say, "They deserve it." To believe that letting Novaris collapse under its own greed was justice. But I hadn't built Halcyon to watch it be used as a weapon by anyone, even me. Just after 300 p. My phone rang. Victor Langston? I didn't let it go to voicemail. "Elise," he said, skipping any pretense of civility. "Where is it?" Where's what I asked, voice calm, the key, the protocol link, the master access to stabilize the core logic. "Don't play dumb." I walked to the window. The city pulsed below me, unaware of the unraveling in that glass tower across town. "Victor," I said, "you made a decision to remove me from my own work. You replaced trust with control. And now you're surprised that you can't force a system built on integrity to obey you. You're sabotaging the company." "No," I replied. "You sabotaged yourself. I just refused to help you finish the job." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing hard. "We have investors flying in from Berlin, Tokyo, São Paulo. The board meets in 4 days. If this doesn't work, we're ruined," I offered gently. Another pause. This one deeper, quieter, like something inside him finally realized the scope of his miscalculation. "We can fix this," he said, almost begging. "Come back. We'll renegotiate. Share rights. Recognition. Whatever it takes." For a moment, I almost pitied him. But I remembered how he looked that day in my office, how cleanly he handed me my termination like it was nothing. I remembered the way he tried to erase 5 years of work with a single folder and a smirk. "No, Victor," I said, "you don't need me to fix it. You need me because you broke it beyond repair." And I hung up. That night, Naomi called. "We've had 4 inquiries today from companies wanting to license Halcyon." She said, "I told them it wasn't ready." "Thank you," I said. "It isn't." Victor called me too. That made me pause. He did what begged me to intervene. Asked if I'd convince you to share the architecture so Novaris could recover. I laughed, not bitter, just stunned. He really doesn't understand. "Does he know?" Naomi said softly. "But the world is starting to." The next morning, headlines bloomed across every major tech outlet. Novaris, in crisis core, product Halcyon. Malfunctioning days before launch. Rumors swirl around patents and internal turmoil at Novaris Systems. Whose innovation? Is it, anyway, the curious case of Elise Harrington? I didn't answer any interview requests, but I did receive a message from James, one of our former systems analysts. Half the team is gone. The other half wants to follow. Just tell us where to go. I looked at the screen, heart full. They weren't just following me. They were following the version of Halcyon they believed in, the version built not for profit, but for purpose. By 5 euro per m. Victor had called me 4 more times. I didn't answer. He'd already received his response. Not from me, but from the code, from the logic, from the truth he tried to bury. Halcyon had outgrown him, and so had I. 3 days after Victor's last call, I walked back into the spotlight. Not at Novaris. At Aeon Quantum's Global Summit, in a quiet auditorium filled with journalists, engineers, and thinkers, people who, like me, once believed tech could be more than stock prices and exit strategies. I stood backstage in a soft navy blue suit, Naomi beside me, both of us watching the projection screen as the title faded in Reclaiming the Future Ethics, Ownership, and the Next Leap in Quantum Encryption. She looked at me with the faintest grin. "You ready, No?" I said honestly. "But it's time." When I walked onto the stage, there was a moment of stillness, like the room collectively inhaled and didn't exhale. Some recognized me. Some had only read the articles. But every eye was fixed on me now. "My name is Dr. Elise Harrington," I began, letting the microphone pick up the calm in my voice. 3 years ago, I started building something that I believed could redefine how we protect information, how we protect people. It was never meant to be a product. Pause. It was meant to be a promise. I watched heads tilt, pens stop moving. In recent days, you've heard rumors that the Halcyon encryption system, the one previously housed at Novaris Systems, has experienced critical failures, that questions of ownership and integrity have surfaced. I let the silence grow, like a door cracking open. Today, I'm here not to defend my role in creating Halcyon, but to reclaim it, not just in name, but in spirit. I took a breath, then nodded toward the technician. At the corner of the stage, on the screen behind me, a real-time interface blinked to life, smooth, stable, flowing like it was breathing. "This is Halcyon," I said, "not the broken fragment stripped of its roots, but the original living system, adaptive, biometric, transparent." A hush fell. "Licensed under my name, patented and verified. And now, protected by a team that believes technology should serve trust, not power." After the presentation, I was swarmed. Not with cameras. Naomi had made sure press was limited, but with people, real engineers, former colleagues, even a few old rivals who offered silent, grudging nods of respect. I spotted Rowan near the back. He stepped forward and held up 2 fingers in mock salute. "You always hated the spotlight." "And yet," I smiled, "here we are." He pulled out a small flash drive. "The others asked me to give you this. Logs from the past 2 weeks. Proof of tampering, of Victor rewriting architecture he didn't understand. In case it helps the lawsuit." I took it carefully. "It helps more than you know." Later that evening, back at the new Aeon lab, I sat alone in my office with the lights dimmed. On the wall opposite me hung 2 things: a framed copy of USPTO patent 16Q Halc, and a news clipping from the day before, headline, "Bold Novaris, CTO steps down amid backlash over encryption failure." Victor's face was blurred in the image, half-shadowed. Anonymous sources had detailed his internal collapse, how he tried to spin the failure as technical, only to be undone by the board discovering the patent had never belonged to Novaris in the first place. The story had gone viral. So had the backlash. Investors were demanding their money back. Legal teams were scrambling to limit exposure. Staff morale had plummeted. And more quietly, more devastatingly, trust had eroded. In the world of encryption, trust was everything. At 10:43, Naomi walked into my office holding 2 glasses and a bottle of champagne. "Official welcome gift," she said, "and an apology for not stealing you away years ago." I laughed, a deep, tired laugh that loosened something in my chest. "You would have hated me then," I said. "I was still trying to prove I belonged." Naomi poured. "You never had to prove it. They just weren't ready to see you." We toasted, clinked, and fell into a comfortable silence. Outside the lab's window, the skyline pulsed with city light and the distant hum of electric trains. Everything moved. Everything changed. "I keep thinking," I said slowly, "about all the engineers still at Novaris, the ones who stayed because they didn't know, or didn't think they had a choice." Naomi sipped her drink. "They'll find you now." And she was right. My inbox was already filling with quiet messages. Some just said thank you. Others asked, plainly, "Can we join you?" I spent the rest of the night drafting a different kind of roadmap. Not for Halcyon's code base, not for its next update or use case, but for the kind of culture I wanted to build here, where innovation wasn't ripped from hands, where contribution wasn't reduced to a line in a quarterly report, a space where creation meant collaboration, not conquest. I didn't just want to outmaneuver Victor. I wanted to build something he could never imagine. 3 months later, Halcyon launched again, not as a repackaged product of a failing corporation, but as the beating heart of a new infrastructure rebuilt, reimagined, and reclaimed under the name EtherGuard, deployed through Aeon Quantum. Within its first 2 weeks, it secured contracts with 3 hospitals, 2 government agencies, and 1 grassroots nonprofit that protected journalists and human rights workers in hostile regions. I had insisted on that last one, because from the beginning, Halcyon wasn't just code. It was conviction. We held the launch press event in a small auditorium, not far from where the Novaris Tower loomed in silence. No confetti, no overpriced catering, just a team of engineers, a simple demonstration, and a message security should belong to the people who need it most, not the ones who can afford to exploit it. There were no fireworks, but the silence that followed our presentation wasn't boredom. It was reverence, the kind that comes when people see something that wasn't built to impress, but to endure. After the event, I walked back to my office alone. On the wall were 2 frames, the first USPTO patent, Nagnoam Yen 6S7Q, Halc signed, sealed, and now respected. The second, a laminated printout of that tech site article from 3 months ago. They fired her. She took the future with her. I didn't hang them as trophies. I hung them as reminders of what I had almost allowed to be taken, and of what I refused to surrender. Because the truth is, I hadn't just built a system. I had built a boundary, a message, a refusal. You don't get to erase me because I don't fit your version of leadership. You don't get to inherit my brilliance while denying me my name. I think about Victor Langston sometimes. The last I heard, he had stepped down voluntarily, though insiders knew it was a forced resignation. He now consults for startups, mostly younger founders, who haven't yet learned what he cost Novaris. None of his new ventures have lasted longer than a quarter, and I don't feel triumphant about that. Not anymore. What I feel is peace, because I know he never understood what he tried to steal. He saw code, patents, monetization models. He never saw the 2 of EM. Rewrites, the ethics arguments, the whispered doubts in empty labs. He never saw the version of me who wondered if I was dreaming too big, if I belonged. And he certainly never saw the girl who once built encryption logic out of colored beads as a child because she couldn't afford a computer. On my desk sat a list of names: Rowan, Lana, James, and 9 others who had walked away from Novaris and into something better. They weren't just joining Aeon, they were helping to shape what we would become. Each brought more than skills. They brought questions. Who owns the work when you build it late at night? Where's the line between contribution and exploitation? What happens when systems meant to protect are turned into weapons? We didn't have all the answers, but at least here we were allowed to ask. Sometimes, new interns would visit my office and glance at the patent on the wall. One of them, a young woman named Nadia, once asked me, Dr. Harrington, how did you know what you built was worth fighting for? I looked at her, barely 22, brilliant, awkward, full of the fire I once buried under humility, and said I didn't know. Not at first, but I knew what it felt like when someone tried to take it. She nodded slowly, then added, I hope I'm as brave when my time comes. I smiled. I hope you never have to be. The world would move on. There would be new technologies, new disputes, new headlines. I wouldn't always be at the center of them. But maybe, just maybe, my story would stay somewhere in the background, a quiet reminder to those who'd been told they weren't business-minded enough, bold enough, executive enough. And maybe the next time a manager looked at a researcher and saw only a stepping stone, they'd remember what happened when one of those quiet types turned around, planted her feet, and said, this belongs to me, and I am not afraid to protect it. That evening, Naomi joined me on the roof of our building. We didn't say much at first. Just watched the city breathe beneath us. The amber grid of street lights like veins across concrete skin. She handed me a glass of wine. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't filed that patent? I chuckled. I try not to. She nodded. Still, I think the real breakthrough wasn't Halcyon. I looked at her. She raised her glass. It was you. I didn't respond right away. But as I clinked my glass to hers, I realized she was right. The most important thing I had ever built wasn't just software. It was a sense of self that no one could erase again. 3 months after the launch, Aeon Quantum was flooded with requests, not just for EtherGuard, but for internships, for collaborations, for access to our internal culture docs. Turns out, what people really wanted was a place where integrity lived, where ideas were protected not with barbed wire, but with principle. We gave a few talks at universities. I started mentoring again, and every so often, I'd share the story not as a victory tale, but as a lesson. Your greatest power isn't what you build. It's knowing your worth and never letting anyone else define it for you. And in that, perhaps, lay the real encryption, a lock no one could break, unless you gave them the key. In a world where power often silences integrity, she chose to speak through action. She didn't slam doors. She didn't scream. She simply walked away carrying with her not just lines of code, but a lifetime of conviction. And when they tried to erase her, she didn't fight for revenge. She built something better, something that couldn't be stolen, because it was rooted in truth. Dr. Elise Harrington's story isn't just about technology. It's about every person who's ever been told they're not enough, while their work fuels someone else's success. It's a story about the quiet brilliance that corporations try to overlook, the resilience of those who don't fit the mold, and the injustice of treating vision like property instead of purpose. So the next time you see someone sitting quietly in a meeting or working late while others take credit, ask yourself, are they being celebrated or simply tolerated? Because maybe, just maybe, they're building something that could change everything. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. We have more stories coming, real, powerful, and unforgettable, about the people who stayed true to themselves in a world that told them not to. Until next time, stay kind, stay bold, and never let them define your worth.